Welcome to the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev, where we explore and share experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week from across the games industry, helping you make the best game you can. Stay tuned for today's episode. Good morning, Overload Nation. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Dev Talk, talking to game developers from across the world to bring you experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week. Today, I'm joined with Garret Cooper from SuperDupergc Game Company to talk about his first game, Black Ice. Garret, talk about yourself first, please, and how you got into the games industry.
Oh gosh. Well, so when I was in algebra class, when I was in like middle school, all my friends had TI-83 calculators and they all had games on them. And I had a TI-86 calculator, so I couldn't put their games on my calculator. So what I had to do is I had to download the source code for those games and then punch it into my calculator by hand. And so that's kind of how I started learning programming. Just teaching myself TI Basic through that, and it's not the easiest language, or not certainly not the most powerful. But yeah, after that, kind of messed around with a little bit of programming here and there, but didn't really learn until I went to college for engineering. Um, but then I had about 2 years ago, I had moved out to California for a job, and I finished reading Game of Thrones, and so I had this like giant void in my life of time that I needed something to do. My friend was like, "Hey, why don't you pick up Unity?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not? I'll give it a try." And I started with a tutorial about how to make like a sliding puzzle, those little 15 tile rearranging things.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I kept going with that, and I realized, oh hey, Unity has this cool first person character controller thing, and I could just drop that into the game, and all of a sudden, instead of looking down at the puzzle, I was standing on top of it and walking around. And I was like, oh, that's super easy. So I was like, well, maybe I can put some ground down so I can run around. And so then I added a terrain in. And Black Ice kind of grew up out of that. I almost accidentally made it.
Oh, interesting. You accidentally slipped into making a game. That's an interesting way of development.
Yeah. So I mean, once I realized that it was starting to be something interesting, one of my friends was looking at it and he's like, "Well, yeah, you can walk around and you can kind of shoot lasers at these blocks on the map, but like what's the point?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, you know, what sort of things can I do with, my art expertise?" And I was like, "Well, I can put a grid down on things and I can make things kind of look wireframe." And I was like, "Oh, this kind of looks like cyberspace. Maybe I can make a cyberspace game." And
Hmm.
yeah, so just working around my limitations, and I just built up from there. And I put it on Reddit's Feedback Friday, in the game dev subreddit, and they were really cool about it. And they were like, "Hey, this is good, this is bad." They gave me really good feedback. And one guy, Kale, who actually he made Quarries of Scred. It's another game that's on Steam and whatnot, but he posted a video of my game, and it was super encouraging because I didn't think people really enjoyed it. And it was him playing the game on YouTube. He was doing a let's play. It was one of the first let's plays I ever saw, actually.
Hmm.
And it was really cool.
So, tell us about Black Ice then. Tell us about the game and what you wanted the player to experience.
Okay. So Black Ice is a cyberpunk hacking game. So it's a first-person shooter with a lot of RPG elements. So I kind of call it like Borderlands meets Tron. What I want the player to experience is dread, actually. I want them to realize that cyberspace is a dangerous place, and one wrong move and they're dead. And I want them to know that, like, oh, I'm level 2, whatever. I can't take out that level 10 building. It's going to kill me. But then later, when they, get a couple of items, and maybe they're not level 10 yet, but they found like a cool combo of like, stunning something in place, then setting it on fire, something like that. Um, then they can go back and take out that level 10 building that owned them before. And that's just such a great feeling of accomplishment for them, especially coupled with how much dread they feel at the beginning. Um, that that I it it's just great. It was
Uh,
inspired, actually, if you don't mind. So my wife went and played WoW, and she used to get killed by the kobolds in a particular mine outside of Goldshire. And when she hit level 80, she went back and just slaughtered kobolds for like 2 hours. And she's just sitting there laughing. I walk in, I was like, "What are you doing? Why are you there?" And it was kind of horrifying actually. But she had to get revenge for the ones that killed her.
It's all right. I think I know which gold mine in Goldshire that your wife was talking about. I played that. I played that game for a while, and to be honest, that's something I would do if I was level 80. Go back to the lower level zone, just explore and mess around.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it came to promoting the game, what worked well and what didn't work so well?
Oh gosh. Okay, so Twitter has been really great. Um, Surprisingly, or maybe I guess not surprisingly, Game Jolt and IndieDB have also been really good. So I just put demos of the game on there, and I've had a ton of Let's Players find my game through IndieDB and then just post videos on YouTube. And I've tried to be um, really supportive of Let's Plays and people who like to stream on Twitch. I think the game plays pretty well because it's got lots of bright colors and explosions and stuff going off. So it's fun to watch. Um, so Twitch has worked out really well for me. I've made a lot of friends through Twitch. It's fun to join chats and talk to people. And what hasn't worked so well, um, I did a Twitter like campaign, and it really didn't seem to have any effect at all. And it cost money, whereas a lot of these other things really only cost your time. Um, I have a Facebook page for Black Ice, which is nice because some people prefer that method of getting a hold of you, but I don't get as much engagement on there as I do on Twitter. Although Twitter's actually kind of gotten a little quieter recently for some reason. I can't figure out that out. Um, yeah, let's see. Conventions have been really great. Like you're not going to make your money back directly on a convention, even if you sell the game, which I do sometimes. We're actually going to go to RTX next weekend in Austin, so we moved back to Texas, and it's really nice that I can make it to RTX this year.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so conventions you don't make your money back immediately, but like the number of people that you talk to and the people that play your game, and then they can say to their friend, "Oh yeah, I played that one. It's fun." Like I'm just I really like going to conventions. It's also a really good encouragement because you talk to people about like what you want to do and what they'd like to see, and it really makes it easy to come back and code a whole bunch.
Oh yeah, that kind of goes into another question I have later on, but I don't doubt that going to conventions, you talk directly to your consumers, to the people who play the game, and they talk directly to the devs, and then it's an excellent avenue for feedback and sharing your thoughts and feelings and opinions.
Absolutely.
So how did you go about funding the game?
So funding has been very low budget at first. So let's see, um, before I started selling the game on early access, which really is where all you know 95% of the funding has come from. Um, Really, the only things that I paid for were like a couple of models maybe, and then oh, I paid V-Axis, the composer, for some of the music, and then I got the logo made. But then after that, all of the money has come from the early access funding.
Okay.
Yeah, it works out
So
really
yeah, go on. What works really well?
well. So early access works well for some games. My game in particular, because um, it's very modular, and there's a lot of procedural generation. So when people come back to the game, it can feel like a different game where they can, you know, learn to explore it in a different way. Try different items out, try different builds out. Um, so it's particularly well suited for early access.
Oh, I see. So when there's a new version added, the game is noticeably different.
So to me, yes, it depends.
Hmm.
So like like sometimes I'll go through and I'll redo all the balance, and then it feels different when you play it. It doesn't necessarily look different, but um, I just added a perk system, and I've added a couple more this week where um, not only do you get the talent points in the game, which make you a little bit better at like damage or hacking faster or attacking faster, that sort of thing. But also, you can get these perks, which are supposed to complement the way that you play, but also change the way that you play. So one of them, there's a disc item that's kind of like the identity disc in Tron, where you throw it out and it loops back, and then you catch it again. And normally you can only have one disc in flight per item at a time, although you could have multiple disc items. But this lets you have 5 at a time. So if you get enough attack speed, you don't just send the one disc out, you send like 5 of them out. And it's really crazy. If you like using the disc, it can help it be a lot more competitive with some of the other weapons at higher levels.
Oh, sounds crazy at the same time.
It is. And yeah, so my goal with the perks have been things that I'm looking at them and I think, you know, someone's going to find a way to make this overpowered, but right now it feels pretty good. Most people are it's not going to be too bad.
That's all right. So speaking of too bad, how did you go about QA in the game and getting feedback for it?
So honestly, early access has been crucial for QA because really it's just me doing testing, but the players have been really nice about bug reports. There's a bug report forum on Steam, and people will tell me anything that bothers them, and and I'm honest with them. I say, hey, I'll get to that as soon as I can. I'm just one guy, and thank you for telling me about the bug. Even if I knew about the bug, I always make sure to thank people for telling me about them, and they're really understanding that it's early access. You expect there to be bugs, and I fix them, and when they see that I go through and I fix their bugs, usually pretty quickly, they're happy to continue playing, and they'll give me more bug reports.
Cool. So, what was cut from the game, and why?
Cut from the game.
Yeah.
So, what I have is I have a really big to-do list. And it's a public to-do list, and the players can go through and like vote on things that they want and like add comments and suggestions and whatnot. So I don't necessarily cut things so much as I just put it on this to-do list and forget about it. I think maybe I'll add it later, maybe I won't, but it's not top priority. But yeah, things that I've like deprioritized. Let's see. I have deleted some of the things on here. I really wanted to do Oculus Rift support for a while. That was the biggest thing probably that I had actually planned to get it done. I bought a Rift, I tried it out, and it just really was not well suited for it. Most games on the Rift are like much slower experiences if they allow you to control your character at all. There are a lot of on rails things, and there's a whole list of game elements that Oculus says, maybe you should cut down on these or avoid these sorts of things. And I do almost every single one of them in Black Ice. So I have the player moving very quickly. I have the player moving in directions other than directly forward. I have the player needing to turn the camera rapidly multiple times. I have the player teleporting. And it's just, I could make it work, but I'd have to drastically change the game.
Well, you're also breaking the rules as well, which is fine.
Yeah. But cool. It was nauseating when I tried it out.
That's all right. Well, it's an experience. It's a feature.
It really wasn't playable. It didn't feel right to me. But I'll tell you, it was terrifying to look over there and see these spider things rushing at your face. Because, I mean, you really sense the depth.
Okay, that sounds quite an experience. So, what was the biggest thing you learned while working on the game?
So, I've learned a lot of things. Like, I've learned how to talk to people a little bit better in terms of like responding to feedback, and I've learned games take a whole lot longer to make than you think, and scope creep is a problem. And let's see, and that when you're developing, you really have to. You don't spend all your time coding. I mean, you spend, you know, 50% of the time promoting the game, and you spend, 20% of your time doing bug report or doing bug fixes on the game, and only that 30% are you actually like making new things, and
Hmm.
um, that's interesting. But I make sure to kind of mix it up so that like if I fix a bunch of good bugs, then I'll say like, all right, so no more bug fixing for now. Let's have some fun here and add some more fun stuff.
Oh, definitely, I understand.
Yeah.
So, what was the worst thing that happened, and how did you overcome it?
Hmm. Uh, so luckily, I haven't had too many big issues. I have, accidentally released some patches that had some like debug stuff left in the game. So one time, none of the players could take any damage. Uh, so I was like, "Well, enjoy it while it lasts. I'm at my day job, and I'll fix it tomorrow." Like, uh, so that was a fun one. Let's see. One time we lost the key to the lockbox while we were at a convention, and we had to
Hmm.
go to a hardware store and buy a screwdriver so that we could break open the lockbox so that we could get to the key codes on there.
Wait. What do you mean? Open the lockbox is like a
Yeah, so
can.
we were selling copies of the game, and we had actually at this convention we had the game. Um, we had Steam keys printed out and pasted on floppy disks. Um,
Right.
and the floppy disks had a demake version of the game, which actually you can find the demake on itch.io. It's called Black Ice 89. Um, and yeah, so all of those keys and all of the change that we were using were in this lockbox, and we had the box, but we didn't have the key.
Hmm.
So we had to like go and find some tools to break it open.
Oh dear, that sounds quite tedious. I thought you were referring to like the entrance to the actual convention or something.
No, 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 not like that.
Okay, cool. So, what was the best game dev purchase you made? Whether it was a software license, a top quality piece of hardware or equipment, or simply a comfortable chair and a good desk?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I'm mostly thinking of software right now. I mean, honestly, setting up a good microphone and streaming has been really nice. I stream my development on Twitch sometimes, and that's really good for getting player suggestions and feedback and making friends and whatnot. Um, let's see, some of my favorite purchases. Um, Working with my composer has been super great because his music just adds so much to the game. Um, so I did buy Unity Pro, and I have mixed feelings about Unity Pro because it did allow me to do bloom and all these cool image effects and whatnot before um, Unity released the Unity 5 version, which lets people with the unpaid version do that as well. So that's why I have mixed feelings about that. Um, but yeah, honestly, the best thing that I got probably was the little spider because it was just a free asset on the Unity asset store, and I reskinned it, and it adds so much to the game as well. It's just
When you say,
creepy.
oh yeah, cool store, interesting. So when you say you were developing via Twitch, how did you get people to watch you and such? Because wouldn't you be like one of potentially hundreds or thousands of people twitching at the same time?
Absolutely.
So imagine there's categories, and you would have posted it on Facebook. How would that have worked exactly?
Yeah. So most of the people that I get coming through Twitter, actually, I do have a decent Twitter following. Everybody's really nice on there. But the Twitch added a game development category. So if people are actually wanting to see how games are made, they can go through and browse and see like, oh, well, this guy's streaming right now, and that category is
Wow.
significantly smaller than any of the other ones.
Wait, what's smaller than other ones?
It's the game development category on Twitch is,
Ah, right.
yeah.
Okay. Ah.
So yeah, if you're looking at like the top Twitch channels, you're going to see like League of Legends way up there. But if you're looking specifically at game development, I'm on a pretty short list.
Cool. I think that's worthwhile actually in the future
Absolutely.
to do that. So, what game development related book, lecture, or learning resource can you recommend?
Ooh. Okay. So for Unity tutorials, um, Jesse Etzler does some really good ones. He's got a YouTube channel. oh gosh, Bergzerk Arcade is another one that does good YouTube tutorials. I Let's see other books that I used. There was that one really good Vlambeer, which gosh, I don't remember exactly. It was called The Art of Screen Shake, that they did. Yes, which Jan, the main developer, he did that video, and that one is just great for polish and whatnot, and that gives you good ideas for things. But I read Gamesutra, and they have some good ideas on there a lot of the time. But actually, there was a League of Legends thread where they were talking about, and this is mostly for competitive play, but it's like, when you build an effect, you really want it to have some counterplay to it, and that makes a lot of sense, not just for competitive play, but like when you're designing NPCs in the game. You need the player to be able to avoid their attacks, for instance, and it seems really obvious, but it's something that maybe you don't think about when you're putting things together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and actually, one of the biggest ones was a TED talk that really influenced me. So it was a TED talk about if people are given a choice and they're allowed to change their choice, and they're they become less confident in their choice because they are allowed to change it, and they're therefore less happy with their choice, which is a really interesting effect because it's very applicable to RPGs, because in an RPG, you change the way that you play, by getting different like abilities and like talents and perks. And for instance, in Diablo 2, you have that whole skill tree, and any of your you couldn't change your setup in that. You just had to like re-roll your character if you wanted to change something different. But because you can't change things, you become much more attached, and your brain just convinces itself that, oh yeah, I did that right. I got a pretty good character here. You know, I can't change anything, but I'm happy with my choices. And so that's why the talents and the perks in the game are permanent choices. And if you want to change something, you just have to make a new character.
Interesting concept. I can understand and believe that. That's really cool. Um, so speaking of cool, like an Evernote or Trello, do you have a useful or productivity enhancing software, app, extension, or website worth sharing?
Yeah, so I do definitely use Trello. I also use Presskit, for my website. I use Slack to collaborate with some of the people that I've been working with. So I have a friend that's been working on procedurally generated plot, and we've been talking about that a lot through Slack and like sharing screenshots and stuff. Um, let's see. Those are my three main ones. I mean, Trello is just super great because even if I'm out and about somewhere, I've got the app, and if I come up with a cool idea, I'm not going to lose it. I just throw it on there somewhere and put it in the right category, and I can find it later.
Oh, cool. So, so Garrett, 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 what advice can you give to aspiring game developers, small indie studios, and people trying to get to where you are today?
So I would say, always treat other people like people, and they'll treat you like a person in return. Just say, hey, this is what I'm working on. I don't have the time to do all of these things. I'd like to work on that, but I can't yet. And people are, for the most part, reasonable about those things. I would say for aspiring game developers, don't call yourself an aspiring game developer. Once you've made something, you're a game developer. Just start putting stuff together and showing it to people. Don't be afraid. There are some people that are going to be mean about it, but just don't worry about them. And don't ever compare yourself to anybody but your previous self,
Mm.
because you're improving, and you don't know what those other people have gone through or how much help they've had to get to where they are.
Oh, definitely, definitely. So, what is next for you, and what's the best way to contact you?
Ah, so, well, So Black Ice still in early access, and I'm definitely still working on it. I'm heavily working on development. I've got the Rooster Teeth Expo this weekend. I might be at IndieCade. I don't know. I'll probably do some more conventions next year too. As for next games, I'm gonna try to do more like a spin-off game. So like Black Ice would work pretty well as, for instance, a twin stick shooter or a like an arena shooter sort of game too. So I could work in that same sort of space. And what was the second question? I'm sorry.
What's the best way to contact you?
Oh, yes. Best way to contact me is pretty much just Twitter. I am at Black Ice the Game on Twitter. I'm also at SuperDupergc if you just want to talk to me and not about the game. I love answering questions for new developers or just really anybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, Garrett, it appears that we're out of time for this episode of the Daily Dev Talk. Great talking to you, and some really cool concepts like developing live on Twitch, which is something I hadn't really thought about. Someone who I spoke to before on episode 24 or something mentioned that they play the game every week on Twitch after an update or something of the sort, or every Friday at 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool as well. So Twitch leveraging other kinds of social media, using it to your advantage, which I think is pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Great way to interact as well. And this TED Talk you mentioned just now about people not having a choice. Interesting concept. I agree with that, because I can imagine people will say, well, maybe it's not as good because I can always change it, you know. They can always, like, undo button or something.
Exactly.
So some really cool concepts. I wish you well on Black Ice.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And it was great talking to you.
Thanks for having me on. It's been great.
So stay tuned, Overload Nation. More episodes of the Daily Dev Talk to come. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev. If you are a game developer that wants to get your name and game out there and to share your experiences and stories, or you have feedback or opinions of the show, then contact me at info@gameoverload.co.uk. That's info@gameoverload.co.uk. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode. More to come.